The Green Sheet is a financial publication of the MWRA Advisory Board. The May 2015 installment is an overview of the Advisory Board's FY 2016 comments and recommendations. This video will focus only on the financial topics. For other policy-related recommendations, please refer to our website for the full document posted at the end of May. We'll first review the Advisory Board's recommendation for the FY16 combined rate assessment increase and then cover the new rate projections for future years in the wake of the decisions made by the Long-Term Rates Management Committee regarding the release of reserves. Additionally, the excellent standing of the MWRA's pension fund turns our attention to the creation of an OPEB trust fund to begin addressing the liability of other post-employment benefits. Finally, the Advisory Board's comments and recommendations document takes an in-depth look at underspending in relation to the 5-year CIP spending cap and asks the question, what is the right amount of capital spending for the MWRA? For a more in-depth analysis on these topics, please view the full document. Starting with the most common question on everyone's mind, what is the rate assessment increase for FY16? This chart breaks out rate revenue requirements by utility and combined. The key at the bottom shows water in blue, sewer in red, and the combined rate revenue requirements in green. The combined rate assessment increases have always been a target of the Advisory Board, which in FY11 recommended no rate increase, eventually compromising with the MWRA on a 1.49% combined rate increase, the lowest since 1996. Unfortunately, that was not sustainable due to scheduled debt service levels. Since FY11, the Advisory Board and MWRA have come to the agreement that rate increases should be sustainable and predictable so that communities can prepare for their upcoming budgets with a degree of certainty. Due to fixed costs associated with debt service on capital projects, this has meant rate increases in the mid-threes. We'll get into future rate projections in a minute, but the FY16 proposed rate assessment increase of 4.1% is too high, and the Advisory Board recommends lowering it, discussed next. The MWRA proposed an FY16 budget of $677 million, a $26.7 million increase. The Advisory Board recommends lowering that increase by a net of $4.8 million for an FY16 combined rate assessment increase of 3.36%. Here are the ways that the Advisory Board recommends getting there. This is a comprehensive list of cost changes from the proposed FY16 budget. The table is broken into 3 sections. First are Advisory Board recommendations, which include staffing assumptions, various project-related changes detailed in the document, and the belief that any annual contribution to OPEB should not be subject to the operating reserve requirement that the pension fund is subject to, because while it is the legal obligation of the MWRA to fund its pension, it is not currently required to fund OPEB, though the Advisory Board does believe it is the prudent thing to do. More on this later. Next, here's a long list of anticipated adjustments to the FY16 CEB. These are essentially changes that happened between the time the budget was transmitted in March and the time it's finalized in May and June. Changes to direct and indirect costs this year are mainly impacted by lower assumptions for pricing of chemicals and utilities. On the flip side, anticipated budget increases are also included, and the addition of the contaminant study is interesting as it is part of a growing effort to protect the Wachusett Reservoir from impacts of potential railroad accidents. 2 of the most interesting changes for capital financing and reserves include the removal of the core fund deposit. At the time the budget was developed, the authority was obligated to put money into the core fund, but has since fulfilled their requirement and will not have to do so. This will also allow the MWRA to remove the use of any rate stabilization funds in FY16, preserving these funds to ensure that future rate assessment increases can be kept in check. When we include the further savings from the operating reserve requirement, the net changes are $4.8 million, resulting in a 3.36% increase from FY15 to 16. Let's look at this in the big picture with a multi-year projection. These are the projected rate changes at the time the FY16 budget was developed. You can see that 4 of the next 5 years, FY16 through 20, were projected to have rate increases over 4%. With the decision of the Long-Term Rates Management Committee to aim 91% of released reserves at future rate revenue requirements, the next 5 years are now below 4% increases, with the Advisory Board's recommendation of 3.36% in FY16 and no use of rate stabilization funds. The next few years don't present significant challenges until FY20, when over $30 million would be required to lower the rate revenue requirement. This would also keep the projected rate increase under 4 for FY21, but would leave no projected rate stabilization funds available in FY22. Obviously, this is a long-term projection, and a variety of predictable and unpredictable things will change this outlook, but it shows the need to continue to preserve rate stabilization funds. Moving now to the pension and OPEB conversation, the MWRA and Advisory Board have agreed to view these liabilities as 2 sides of the same coin. One is legally required to fund through an annual required contribution, and the other is accrued as a liability on the books, but is not legally required, which is OPEB. The Advisory Board therefore refers to the OPEB contribution not as the ARC, but as the ACC, or Actuarial Calculated Contribution. The two sides of the same coin argument led to an agreement to fund the pension side first before beginning to fund OPEB. Those contributions are as follows. In FY15, the pension ARC was $7.8 million, and half of the OPEB ACC was $4.8 million. Both went to pension with nothing to OPEB for a total of $12.6 million. Contributing half of the OPEB's ACC is a practice adopted by other agencies as well because, again, it is not required. Now, with the newest actuarial study showing that the pension fund is over 98% funded, with over 95% being considered virtual full funding, the pension ARC will be contributed to the pension fund, and the other payment will be made to the newly established OPEB trust fund, totaling $13.2 million. The new actuarial studies also will now significantly decrease the pension ARC starting in FY17. The breakdown of these two contributions, now that the pension is fully funded, should provide some ratepayer relief in the coming years, and the Advisory Board will continue to monitor these liabilities. The last major financial recommendation is for the authority to reevaluate their capital spending program and determine what is the right level of capital spending for the MWRA. This is the FY14 through 18 baseline cap calculation set at $792 million. There were two previous 5-year caps that were set above $1.1 billion each, but due to underspending, the current cap was dropped to below $800 million in line with previous cap spending. 2 years in, the spending is already falling behind, with $96.6 million spent in FY14, 34% lower than projected, and an updated projection of $102.3 million in FY15, which is 36% below the baseline cap. The recommendation of the Advisory Board is for the MWRA to identify the causes of capital underspending and determine the necessary level of capital spending to maintain the system, then present these findings to the Board of Directors and the Advisory Board in early FY16. To review, the Advisory Board recommends an FY16 combined rate assessment increase of 3.36%. The Advisory Board also recommends that the first budgeted contribution to the OPEB fund be made in FY16, and that each year forward the Authority and Advisory Board evaluate to determine how much to contribute to the trust, not to exceed 50% of the actuarial calculated contribution. And finally, the Advisory Board recommends that the Authority identify the appropriate level of CIP spending and report these findings to the Board of Directors and the Advisory Board. For policy recommendations, please see the FY 2016 Integrated Comments and Recommendations document posted on our website at the end of May. For any questions or comments, please contact us directly or visit our website at www.mwraadvisoryboard.com.